But actually, after that, Romney gets in the governorship, and he calls me election night. I'm in Muskegon. And he said, you know, it was close. He was sorry. He would have liked to have me. But he said, I'd like you on the staff. But he said, I'm going on vacation. I'll call you when I get back. So I waited around a couple, 3 weeks. Came back. I met him down in, he had an office in Bloomfield. And he said, I'd like to have you on the staff. He said, DeVries was going, he said, I can either become chairman of Public Service Commission because the Democrat had not been confirmed. Or he said, I'm looking for somebody to work with the legislature, executive assistant for legislature. Well, I thought about that, and I said, well, legal advisor. Well, he said Van Dusen was coming, but Van Dusen was coming only for a year. That was his only, he was going back to the firm, Dickinson Wright. I said, well, if I go as executive assistant for legislative, when Dick leaves, who I know, can I move to legal advisor? He said, yeah, that'd be fine. So, you know, the Public Service Commission, maybe if I become chairman, I'd be a big wheel in, like vice president of Consumers Power or something like that.
Or Detroit Edison.
Detroit Edison. Leon Cohen became. And so I went on the staff, and in a way it really was great because I got to know the workings of the legislature. I worked with those fellows. So years later when I'm chief judge, and I know my way around and they know me. Fortunately, we didn't have term limits. So the people were there for a while. They got to know you.
Back in 1963, was the Michigan legislature still a part-time legislature?
Very much so. We came in that first year, Allison Green became the speaker. Very big fight in the Senate. Stanley Thayer, the so-called moderate group, took over by 1 vote. So the Senate was really, and this is the old state Senate. And so heavily Republican. I think in the House it's 1 or 2 votes. It's very close. The first thing that Al Green does, he fires, he replaces Bill Conlon as chair of Taxation Committee, who had authored the Conlon report advocating an income tax, which upset the governor, appointed a fellow by the name of Jim Folks. And I go to the speaker, and I did not know Al Green, but it was my job. And Al was very honest. He said, with the inner workings of the legislature, I'm telling you, I'm for an income tax. As long as Bill Conlon is chair of that committee, it will never fly. And he got Jim Folks, and he was right. And it took 4 years, but we did it. But anyway, I worked with the legislature. 63, the new Constitution passes. That's our first big hurdle for Romney. Now remember, this is the first Republican governor in 14 years. Are we going to be another Kim Sigler? Are we going up and down in 2 years? Or are we going to stay? Then we passed other things. Ford Canton, maybe you know it. Ford Canton had to deal with who can draw unemployment if a plant is on strike in say, Ford Motor, parts plant that makes all the ignition thing. Who can draw unemployment? We solved that. The city income tax was a big fight. Swainson had vetoed the non-resident, the Bowman bill. Romney said he was for it, helped him carry Macomb County. We worked out the deal, 1% in the city or up to 0.5% for non-resident. So we got some, but the Constitutional Convention barely passed, but it passed.
In fact, it had to survive a recount, didn't it?
Recount. It's the first election I went to bed saying all the work I'd done was for nothing. I got up in the morning, it was an April election, my wife says, it passed. I said, you're kidding. I was with the governor late. John Mackey was totally opposed to it. He had a big party going in the Jack Tar, whooping it up. They had beat it, you know. Oakland and Wayne County came through. Gus Scholl sort of switched. He gained something on reapportionment, but he didn't like enough. But we had enough support, League of Women Voters, overwhelming press support, and it carried by about 7,000, 8,000. Survived a recount, and so now we're on our way. November 1963, we're in Omaha, Nebraska at a Midwest Governors Conference. Very significant. Romney and the Midwest governors were going out to the Strategic Air Command headquarters. We're going to have a tour of SAC. LeMay had left. We got on a bus with all the governors. I'm on with Dick and the press secretary. Glenn Allen was with us. He was going to Lincoln to look at their Capitol because we were talking about building a new Capitol. We get to the SAC headquarters. We're ushered out of the bus into a briefing room. A colonel comes along and says, the president's party in Dallas has been fired on. We don't know what's up. They're on red alert. I can hear those B-52s. You can just hear them taking off, one after the other. Well, eventually on comes General White himself and says, the president's dead, Kennedy. Immediately the conference breaks up, they issue a statement. I was supposed to have dinner with an old high school friend who was a doctor in Omaha. I saw him the night before. I didn't have time to call him. He sees me going up the ramp on the National Guard plane and says to his wife, Bob is not coming to dinner tonight. We fly home. Now the whole '64 election, which looked like a Kennedy re-election, has changed, you see. And so this begins to really change the landscape. We come into Lansing. We're flying the DC-3. We're coming in a terrible wind. We hit the runway, we're going east. We hit and we bounce. We come down again and we hit hard. And we bounce up, and I know if we come down, the wheels are coming through. Johnny Johnson was the pilot. He pushes it. We puts it back up. We turn around. He comes back in. Bud Vestal is there waiting for the governor. He said, I had the headline, President killed, governor crashes. I said, yeah, thanks a lot. Well, now comes '64. We go to San Francisco. Goldwater is nominated. Romney is for Rockefeller. Actually, for Scranton was a nominee. He, Scranton, Rockefeller, Chafee, who just died from Love from Colorado. But Goldwater is it, and we know that Goldwater is bad news here in Michigan from a political standpoint. Not so much ideology, not that he was a bad man, because he wasn't, but, and Walter Reese begins to take polls, and it just isn't going to fly. Beside which you're running into a Democrat state. The sympathy vote is going to go because people feel guilty about Kennedy, and so they're going to vote for Johnson. And we got Goldwater, which is not going to fly. And so we literally have to set up our own independent, in each congressional district, Romney group, apart from the county. And in the big counties, our own Romney for governor groups, volunteers for Romney, whatever you want to call them. I was given the assignment of setting up most of the outstate congressional districts, which we did. I had help from a gal that worked in the governor's office, Lucille. She was on the program. And we set them up, and so we literally ran ads on how to split your ticket. Now, remember, most people were voting automatics. If you vote, when you pull a straight Democrat lever, you push up for Stabler and pull down for Romney and throw the handle. And I even got some money to a friend of mine in Muskegon to run one of those. And of course, the party people were very upset with it. Poor Art Elliott is state chairman. He's trying to play it in the middle, and it ain't flying. As he said in that program we had here, every time he got Romney ready to say something nice about Goldwater, Milliman, DeVries, and myself would get him back, you can't do that, you see, if you're going to win. Well, we're down at the election night at the Statler, and it comes in, and it's exactly the prediction. It's going to be 2-1 Goldwater. We sat around the night before election. What could we survive? Soapy Williams had survived 350, 400,000, Eisenhower. We said 750 is max. Well, we get the projected vote. It's a 1 million vote landslide for Johnson.
And Romney is running against whom for governor?
Neil Stabler.
Neil Stabler, the congressman at large. Right.
We had wiped that out. Neil was a great guy and a good politician, but he didn't have a lot of charisma, let me put it that way. And anyway, so now we're waiting for those key precincts, and lean Democrat, East Detroit. They come in, and finally we're at 65, 66% Johnson, it's 55% Stabler. We said, we may live. Well, we lived. Johnson carried the state by 1,100,000, Romney carried by 300,000. We now had a Democrat legislature to deal with under Austin Kleiner. One vote short, but Romney had survived. And there were those, including many old Republicans, said, you're a Kim Sigler, a flash in the pan. There were certain Democrats who could hardly wait for election day because now they were going to have the whole state house. They'd had everything but the governorship. Well, Romney survived, and we survived 65 and 66. And Democrats make some blunders. They spend way too much money. I had Joe Mack tell me they're nuts. He said, they're crazy.